Injustice comes in many forms. Sometimes it's allowing the destruction of innocent children, and other times it's in the twisting of the legal system to go after those that defend the unborn. In the case of Coleman Boyd, ER doctor, husband, and father of 13, it's both.
I was a born-again Christian since 1992, zealous for the Lord, love the Lord, doing missions, ministry all over the U.S., all over the world. And for some reason, I never saw it as a practical thing from, I need to be doing something about the shedding of innocent blood. And then in 2007, as I was just reading through the scriptures like I always do, and was reading through Proverbs after I don't know how many times. And as I read Proverbs 24:11, it says, if thou forbear to deliver them that are drawn to destruction and them that are taken to death, if you say, we did not know it, does not he who ponders the heart and he who knows the mind, does he not know it? And will he not give to each one according to his ways? And that obviously can mean many things. I mean, that's the Lord's heart towards the lost. But for some reason, the Spirit of God just pricked me as I read through it that morning and was like, this applies to the babies being aborted. And it was just like a light bulb came on. And so as I continued reading that same morning, as I read on through Proverbs, I got to Proverbs 31:8. It says, open your mouth for the speechless, for the cause of all them that are led to destruction. And again, same stirring by the Lord that this is babies being taken to abortion. Now, I don't think that that's all that that's written for, obviously, but for whatever reason, I had not seen that before. And God just hit me with it. And I can remember going to my wife, but we had 3 children then, I think, or maybe we were pregnant with our 4th, and saying, I know there's an abortion mill somewhere in Jackson. I don't know where it's at, but we're going to find it. And we started going out there with our family on the sidewalk. And so that was kind of a part of what we did. And then in 2017, God really just broke me all before that we had to give everything to see this ended, or our nation's going to be destroyed. And so that's when we went from doing ministry on the sidewalk weekly when we were able to, and during seasons, we've got a big family, and so during farming and homeschooling, we didn't go as often, to where it became our principal ministry. If we were not directed by the Lord to be somewhere else, we were going to be on the sidewalk in Jackson, just because we see it as such a vital thing that, 1, to stand up for these babies, and 2, for our nation, that we are going to be destroyed if we don't do something.
Through the conviction of the Word of God and after much prayer, Coleman and his wife decided they would be on the front lines, pleading with women to save their babies. They traveled across the country with other like-minded families to interact with women on their way to get an abortion. Eventually, this led them to Mount Juliet, Tennessee.
Mount Juliet had one of the 2 abortion mills in the area, Carafim, and so we were on the sidewalk there one day that week, at Planned Parenthood one day that week, and then on March 5th, we went there and did ministry. But that day we went inside a medical building that housed a lot of different clinics, and then it also had an abortion mill in it on the 2nd floor. And so we went to the 2nd floor in the public access area. I was at the end of the hallway and preaching and praying and singing. And so we were there early that morning before they opened. Once the workers came, went inside, and then called the police, and the police came. And when the police asked me to leave, I ended up leaving. And then others stayed for a while and left without getting charged with any kind of trespass or anything. And then I think there were 13 that stayed and were charged with local trespass that day, 4 juveniles and 9 adults, I think. And in my mind, that was just like every other ministry that we do. We go out and our heart is preach the gospel, rebuke sin, preach the law of God and the glorious gospel of Jesus, offer help to mamas. And sometimes we see babies saved, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we walk away knowing a baby probably died that day, or lots of babies died, but that we planted seeds and crying out to God to let those seeds be there to pierce that mama's heart down the road, that when she comes to the point of brokenness, she would turn to the Lord and find salvation. we don't know what all God's doing, but we know we're there to be his ministers and to offer help and trust him with the outcome. And so as far as I was concerned, that was it. That's what happened that day. But he had some other plans for us.
What should have been an ordinary outreach event at an abortion facility turned into an encounter with the Biden administration Department of Justice. Coleman and 5 others were charged, then convicted on January 30th of violating federal law. Steve Crampton is senior counsel with the Thomas More Society and represents one of Coleman's co-defendants, Paul Vaughn.
The charges being brought against Coleman Boyd and the other co-defendants are 2. 1, a violation of the FACE Act, Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, which prohibits, among other things, physical obstruction of a, quote, reproductive health care facility. The second charge really is the twist here, and that is a conspiracy against rights, which is a federal statute adopted back in like the 1870s under part of the Ku Klux Klan Act to prohibit interference with constitutional rights in particular, such as the right to vote. So what makes this case significant in many respects is, 1, the severity of the charges and the prosecution, and 2, that they've brought that conspiracy statute to bear, in our understanding, for the first time in our nation's history, Jeff, against peaceful protesters engaging in everyday kind of civil disobedience. So I think that puts this case in a category all by itself.
The idea that we live in a land where children can be murdered tells you the layout of where we're at. Truth is fallen. Isaiah talks about, justice is turned back. Truth is fallen in the streets. The idea that we could even have the possibility of the murder of innocent children be called pro-choice is just insanity to me. But it shows where we're at as a nation. So when we allow that in our streets, to me, it's no surprise then that those who would love their neighbor enough to go, whether it be to go preach the gospel there and to plead for help and to open our mouth, or to those who would see that they need to sit in front of that door. Either way, it's no surprise to me that we're going to be prosecuted and we're going to be have to pay a price for it. Until we come to repentance as a nation, that's the direction we're going. And so it grieves me, but it doesn't surprise me.
As Steve Crampton tells us, there are far-reaching implications of using this method of going after pro-lifers.
The way that the Department of Justice has now pressed into service this conspiracy against rights statute in particular opens the door to the use of that statute against any kind of peaceful protesters or violent protesters for that matter. Folks engaging in the time-honored tradition that our nation really is founded upon of civil disobedience has now become a potential target, at least, for any zealous prosecutor in the federal realm to come against them with this statute that contains the upper limit of a 10-year prison sentence. So even those folks engaging in the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas kind of protest where they've blocked the entrance to the White House, for instance, they block highways, consider BLM and Antifa actions, all those things that this administration in particular has celebrated in the past, now in the hands of a federal prosecutor can become the target of folks that want to put them away for years and years. It completely changes the playing field, in my view, Jeff, of the engaging in peaceful protest. Again, never in our nation's history have we seen this kind of what I would call vicious, targeted action by a politically motivated prosecutor against select groups of protesters. So the sentencing is coming up now on July the 2nd, at least for some of them. There are some motions pending for a continuance on certain defendants. But at any rate, our client, Paul Vaughn, and hopefully others will appear on July the 2nd, at which time the judge will consider a memo from the probation officer analyzing the charges under the federal sentencing guidelines, making certain recommendations. We will have letters of support from the public that weigh in and urge the court for leniency and so forth. We'll be able to make arguments to the court as to why the sentence should be lenient. And the defendants will have an opportunity themselves to address the court if they so desire. Nonetheless, Jeff, the fact remains that every single one of the defendants in Tennessee is now standing before the court in July as a convicted felon. So felony charges in and of themselves, whether they serve a single day in prison, carry enormous penalties and put you under that black cloud of being labeled forevermore a convicted felon.
When people look on this, my hope and prayer is it's going to stir them up to go, this is unjust. And then a light bulb will hopefully go off and go, yeah, but how much more unjust is it for a precious, innocent baby who has done nothing to anyone? They are the least of these, and they are being poisoned and their skin burned, depending on the method, or their limbs ripped off and their skulls crushed. And the injustice done to them is exponentially more than what's being threatened towards the handful of us Christians that are on trial right now. And so my desire is that that's going to light a fire in the church to finally stand up and go, no more.
In addition to praying for the end of abortion, both Coleman Boyd and Steve Crampton urge us to support the repeal of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, or FACE Act. You can also write a letter to the federal judge in Tennessee asking for leniency for Coleman Boyd and the other defendants. The instructions and judge's address are on the Stand Radio podcast page at afr.net.